Hello, my name is Kenzie Holtz, and for my Psychology 356 project, I've decided to do more in-depth research on B.F. Skinner, a behavioral theorist. An in-depth biography of B.F. Skinner, his childhood life. Skinner was born in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania on March 20th, 1904. Grace and William Skinner were his parents, and he also had two brothers. He became an atheist at the age of 15 after a Christian teacher tried to assuage his fear of hell that his grandmother described to him. His parents were strict and had clear rules set out in place for him as a child. He was taught to fear God, the police, and what other people thought. He had one younger brother who unfortunately died at the age of 16. His young adulthood life. He majored in English at Hamilton College in upstate New York. He wanted to become a novelist after college, but was not successful. This time when he was not successful, he referred to as a time of failure in being a writer after college as his dark year. Furthermore, on the dark year background, Skinner majored in English at Hamilton College in upstate New York, and after graduation expected to become a novelist. He built a study in the attic of his parents' home in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He sat down to write. The results were just DOS. He read, listened to the radio, played the piano, and built ship models while waiting for inspiration, which never came. He considered seeing a psychiatrist, but his father told him it would be a waste of money. Skinner was 22 years old and a failure at the only thing he wanted to do. He later referred to this time as his dark year, what Eckerson would call an identity crisis. Skinner's occupational identity as a writer, which he had so carefully constructed during his college years, had collapsed and took with it his sense of self-worth. He left Scranton, New York City's Greenwich Village, but he could not find any inspiration there either. Worse, in his view, was that several women spurned his proclaimed love for them, leaving him so upset that he branded one woman's initial on his arm, where it remained there for years. Just when Skinner thought he had lost all hope, he discovered a new identity that suited him well, which he would cling for the rest of his life. He decided that since writing had failed him, he would study human behavior by the methods of science rather than the methods of fiction. He read Pavlov and Watson and committed himself to behaviorism in thought and deed. Finally, his self-image and identity were secure, at least for a while. He entered Harvard in 1928 to study psychology. He had never even taken a course in that field before, but he earned his PhD in 3 years. He had a choice of behaviorism, led him to reject all feelings and emotions he had tried to draw as a writer. As one historian of he then decided to study human behavior and went to Harvard, earning his PhD in 3 years' time. His adult life. He stayed and taught at Harvard until 1936. He then taught at University of Minnesota and Indiana University, then returning back to Harvard in 1947 and remained there for the rest of his life. In his 40s, he went through a period of depression, which resolved in him returning to his failed identity as a writer. He projected all of his emotional, intellectual discount onto the protagonist of his book. In 1936, Skinner married Yvonne Eve Blue, and they had 2 daughters. In 1989, he was diagnosed with leukemia and died August 18th, 1990. Skinner didn't have much views on women. His focuses were mainly on the behavioral aspect of psychology, but he was happily married with 2 daughters. Skinner's view on religion. He found no sustenance faith through God. Without doubt, Skinner's beliefs were greatly affected from his religion learning in childhood. He was terrified from the fear he had of religion. He says, quote, "Grandmother's threat of hell fire pointed to open lands," he said, "of temptation and sin, painting a negative punitive image of man in relationship with God that he detailed in his autobiography, Particulars of My Life." How Skinner believed we develop our personality. B.F. Skinner proposed that our differences in learning experiences are the main reason behind our individual differences in our behavior. And we learn these patterns of behavior either directly, reward as positive reinforcement of good behavior, or punishment as negative reinforcement of bad behavior, or indirectly through observational learning or model. Skinner believed that it was simply human nature that we behave in the way that we do, and that we would receive rewards of or favorable things. Skinner's views on importance of infancy. Using the operant learning paradigm to organize and explain many of the sequential changes in behavior patterns conventionally thought to constitute infant development. According to Skinner, the term reinforcement refers to strengthening a desired behavior or action from a subject. With the reinforcement settings, a psychologist or parent can increase the probability of the desired response from a child. This means every time a person is rewarded for his or her behavior, there's a greater chance that he or she will continue to behave in that same way till it becomes imprinted in his or her system. So, Skinner believed that through infancy, we developed our behavior and our personality through reinforcements that we had as a kid. The impact that Skinner's upbringing had on the development of his theories. Well, like stated earlier, his younger brother died at the age of 16, and that is a very traumatic, and that most likely had a lot to do with why his theories are solely based on factual evidence and have nothing to do with anything he can't prove in the lab. He has taken the emotional attachment to things out of his theories. Albert Bandura versus Skinner, reinforcement. Bandura went much more in depth on reinforcement. Bandura did agree with Skinner's reinforcement, and he found more use for it beyond just direct reinforcement. He found that people can learn from others' actions. The subject would change their own actions based on the watching of positive or negative reinforcement that was directed towards the other subject. This was found during the Bobo doll experiment. Erik Erikson versus B.F. Skinner. Skinner is a behavioral theorist and Eckerson is a psychological theorist. Skinner believed that there are only 3 operants that affect human behavior, while Eckerson believed that there is 8 stages of development. Skinner believed that rewards were created by one's personality, while Eckerson believed that people move through life having positive or negative experiences. What Skinner would say about me and my personality. Skinner believed that the environment are what determines behavior. According to his view, people have consistent behavior patterns because they have particular kinds of response tendencies. Skinner would say that I have learned to play volleyball by having lots of positive reinforcements throughout my life. I got to the position I am today, playing volleyball at Long Beach State, by practicing every day and seeing progress in my competition. By seeing this progress, this would be a positive reinforcement for me. He would say that I measure high in self-control because I make good grades in school along with doing well in sports. What I think other theorists would say about me. Freud would say that I'm stuck in the oral stage because I have oral fixations like nail biting and always overeating. Jung would definitely say I'm an extrovert because I receive my stimulation from the environment around me. Plus, I'm very sociable. And on the test we took, I tested high in extrovert. Eastern approach. Western psychologists did undertake initial studies of Eastern systems. Western psychologists underestimated and judged the thought of Eastern societies' approaches to medicine because the Eastern approach countered to basic Western assumptions and beliefs. Buddhist and Hinduism systems were most popular among Eastern cultures. Western theory views. The ancient Greeks, however, formalized the four temptations. These ideas came to dominate Western thinking about human behavior and medicine treatments. Most Jews among Western society until the 1800s were concepts of understanding personality, behavior, illness, and treatment of illness amazingly persisted in the Western world. The traditional Western approach is recognized as relativistically useful model provided that because of the limitations imposed by the state-specific relevancy learning and understanding, it is not applied inappropriately to perspectives and states of consciousness and identity outside its scope. If it is so applied, then misinterpretations and misunderstandings may result. Pretty much summing that up, the Western approach was very different than other approaches and had a lot to do with state-specific relevancy and where the location was that enforced whatever learning behaviors and understandings were applied. Western versus Eastern. I've come to believe that the cultural location of the psychologists have a huge impact on the theories created in each time period among Eastern and Western civilizations. Most Western psychologists took in the idea that the usual egoistic sense of identity is natural and appropriate, yet Asian psychologists point out that upon close examination, the ego is nowhere to be found in the Western way of thinking. So there was a bit of a collision with the Western and Eastern views on psychology. Skinner's most important contributions. Skinner found that most any living thing can be conditioned. He states, even a lobster. Skinner found that the greater the reinforcement given during training, the more resistance and conditioned response to extension. Skinner believed that with operant conditioning, he offered a technique to improve human nature and the societies people designed. He talked about the respondent behavior, which was responses made to our elicited by specific environmental stimuli. Operant conditioning, the procedure by which a change in the consequences of a response will affect the rate at which the response occurs. Reinforcement, the act of strengthening a response by adding a reward, thus increasing the likelihood that the response will be repeated. Extension, the process of eliminating a behavior by withholding reinforcement. Operant behavior, behavior emitted spontaneously or voluntary that operates on the environment to change. And here are my references, and that is my presentation. Thank you for watching.